Welcome everyone to Kenneth Hite's AMA. You will ask questions and we will try to answer you as best as we can. I'm sure as best as we can is more than anyone in the industry for can. Let's start with the first one. Is there an implied campaign world for Trail of Cthulhu with Pelgrane's product line? I.e., is there something similar to how Lovecraft Country was implicit in Chaosium's Call of Cthulhu scenarios during Keith Herbert's tenure, or how Masks of Nyarlathotep fed into Pagan Publishing's Call of Cthulhu supplements for Delta Green?
Um, I think that to some extent, everything that I and Will and Gar have added to the mythos is part of our implied campaign world. But I don't think that we are operating under the assumption that the Bookhounds are just across the channel from the Dreamhounds in every Trail of Cthulhu campaign. I think that the implied campaign world is the world of the 1930s plus the world of H.P. Lovecraft plus the world of however much mythos you, the beloved game master or player, like. And though we've got our sort of canon cults and whatnot that are around, I don't know that we even have the degree that of uniformity that Keith Herber enforced at Chaosium. That in theory there could be a a game that's set in Britain that doesn't have the Karachiris in it. For example, Fearful Symmetries doesn't deal with any of the things that are in Bookhounds of London, even the things that aren't in London. Although Steve worked very hard to keep London out of Fearful Symmetries. So I mean, right there you have an example of very distinctively Pelgrane campaign frames that at least are not implied to be in the same universe. So I would say no with a but. And that but is we still have the 1930s, we still have H.P. Lovecraft. Joseph Kerwin can be assumed to exist in everything that we do, but I don't know that even our version of the Black Dragon or the Anannerba is assumed to exist in everything that we do.
Second question. Hi Ken, thanks for being here. Was there anything you thought you wanted to include in the second edition but realized it was only peripheral or didn't have room?
We knew going in that we were not going to get to include a lot of new stuff, that we needed to keep space for mechanics. At every time there's, a monster that I would have liked to have included, the Sand Dwellers, for example, but those basically we had only so much space for the monsters. Ken is not allowed to do everything Ken wants in monsters. So that's why the Outside Entities book exists, is to let me put more monsters in without bloating the book out and breaking its spine. There's things that we did in other Gumshoe games, like the chase mechanics, that I think would have been helpful, obviously, a chase in Trail of Cthulhu, but they take up space and they are more than core Gumshoe in a way. And so we address it as lightly as we possibly can, and then we move on. We just don't have the space to treat a chase as a centerpiece the way that we do in Night's Black Agents.
On vacation in Hawaii and can't stick around but glad you're recording. What's the last book behind you last touched?
Probably Dan Harms's Cthulhu Mythos Encyclopedia. That is a constant resource while I'm working on Outside Entities. Dan is the man. I can't wait for the new edition to come out, and then I will put this on its shelf and put the new edition right there.
I have a follow-up question for that. There are some social media posts that say like combine the last thing that you ate with the last book you like 15th page of the last book you read or something, or the from the book on your left, right? Which book you choose if it's like a general direction in that?
Well, it depends. I mean, is this one of the ones where you have to go live in that world? Because in that case,
Yeah.
I'm not going to pick any of the Cthulhu Mythos books. Is it one where I'm running a game? Then the book that I'm going to pick is George Eberhardt's Geobibliography of Anomalies, which is every crazy thing that's happened in North America and been written down in Fate magazine or the equivalent since Columbus to 1980, I think is when the book came out. So it depends on what the prompt is asking.
Yeah.
Ibrahim. I'm not going to be taken so easily as that.
Justin asks, are there any changes to the core rules in second edition? And if so, will there be a conversion guide?
There's not going to be a conversion guide because the rules didn't change that much. There's going to be a little list of what we changed that's in the back, but it's very minimal changes to the rules themselves. The character sheet has gotten a couple of tweaks. Some of the skills have changed a little bit. Credit rating works a little differently because it was always sort of a bad fit with Gumshoe, and now it's a different kind of fit with Gumshoe. There's a couple of other little tiny changes like that, but in terms of, Trail of Cthulhu is still Trail of Cthulhu. It's just that Kat and Gar got to take my book from 2008 and make it, I hope, clearer to people and maybe put in a couple more examples. The biggest change, obviously, is that the magic system from Rough Magics is in the core book where it belongs. But that's not so much a change to Trail. It's just me being smarter than I was in 2008 and not thinking of the magic system a month after deadline.
I find myself reading Gumshoe books voraciously. I love reading the system and settings, and I find myself very afraid of running them. Any advice? What should you be careful of? What mistake could you do to push people away from Gumshoe?
I'm going to answer your second question first. The mistake that you do to push people away from Gumshoe is try to either overly mechanize it or force them into the story that you're trying to tell. Because Gumshoe stories are mostly mysteries, you have a natural inclination to say, they have to solve the mystery. I have to feed them clues. I have to shepherd them along this path. And that's not how Gumshoe works. Gumshoe is offering the clues to the players. The players put things together. The players move themselves along the path. And if you overly mechanize it and you say, you need to spend architecture here or whatever, that's just breaks immersion. It breaks play. I think that Gumshoe is a amazingly simple engine to run once you have run it. I think maybe twice. You basically have the whole understanding of how to run it, and then it's just about getting better and better and better. But it's the central assumption that you don't roll to find a clue is a thing you can do in any game you're running now. So maybe if you're worried about our pitiless brilliance, just start doing that in whatever your current game is. And then once you've basically got that down to a rhythm, just port your game over into Gumshoe, where it does that naturally instead of unnaturally.
You've worked on a lot of games. How much do you find concepts from one game, either included or cut, show up later in others? I.e., was there anything from NBA that you borrowed for Vampire 5e or vice versa?
A lot of it is that I'm always borrowing mechanics and approaches from any kind of game, not just ones that I've done. So the biggest thing that I borrowed mechanically for Vampire, I changed the system so that it's a roll onto target. So in a sense, I just borrowed Gumshoe for it. But specifically, I was trying to come up with ways to make vampire combat short and memorous and evocative and in the moment. And so I just borrowed Robin's quick shot combat from Yellow King. And so if you look, there's a thing called one roll combat in Vampire 5e core that is, if you don't want to get down into the nitty gritty of I roll, you miss, etc., and you just want to resolve a scene when you're fighting another monster, then you can use that. And I think that worked really well. There's a lot of sort of specifics that, once I've learned how Dragon's Breath rounds work for NBA, I don't forget that knowledge and have to re-look it up for Vampire. But the arsenal of game design tools is bigger than even my resume, and I always have to be using everything that I can out of it if I'm going to design a new game or a new version of a game. And the same thing is, there's things that other games have done that I looked at for NBA. So NBA, of course, famously borrows Elizabeth Sampat's brilliant the push pyramid for the Van pyramid, and that's an insight that I moved in. I put that in Vampire again because it was so good.
Yeah.
I think it's in an appendix now. I don't think it made it into the core book, but the it's such a good way to dramatize the universe that why would I stop doing that?
Was there much discussion of possibly using quick shock rules with the new edition? But there's an answer in the bottom. Garrett addresses this on the Pelgrane blog to an extent.
I
Let's
mean,
answer it.
obviously, read Gar. We talked about it, but we rapidly decided that Trail being sort of the flagship of the fleet, we needed to keep it as close to core Gumshoe as we could. And pushes do a different thing in play. Not everyone is going to want to play Trail the same way as Robin wants people to play Yellow King. So it was just a matter of staying to basic Gumshoe. And anyone who's super invested in pushes, I mean, Yellow King's right there. They can run Trail of Cthulhu with Yellow King without too much headache if that's what they decide they want to do.
Do you plan to publish a second edition of Eternal Lies? It will not be a second edition, but a reprint. We are planning to do a Eternal Lies reprint campaign in either late August or early September. What are you the most excited for us to see in Trail of Cthulhu second edition?
The two new campaign frames I'm very excited about. I love Gar's Oklahoma Stranger Things in the Mound Country. I love that setting, that small town on the verge of the old frontier and the new frontier of science. I think that was a brilliant insight that Gar had. I think it's a great setting. I think I'm hoping, cross fingers, that we get to do a book of it. And in an ideal world, I would be able to, go to Oklahoma with Gar and show him what he's been writing about. And I think that would be huge fun. There's no way to make that work financially, but I really want to do it. Mostly because I'd love hanging out with Gar. And then my Shadows Under Chicago, the Al Capone Falls to Yog Sothoth in 1928 campaign that I've wanted to run and wanted to write. I've run it already when I was a kid running Call of Cthulhu, but I've wanted to write it. I've proposed it, I think, to two different game companies before I got it into Trail. I just had to write my own Cthulhu before I could do it, and
Yeah.
that's great fun. And I think that we're doing some fun and exciting stuff with that backdrop. And again, that's one that I hope gets its own book so that we can really dive in. But it'll be, it's a good campaign frame as it is, and it's going to be, I think, great fun for people to explore and to play in.
The next question is the expansion of this. What are you most proud of? But I guess you answered that.
I mean, I'm most proud of. I mean, I'm proud of the whole thing. I was proud of what I did in 2008, and I'm. There is nothing that cannot be made better by 15 years of perspective and working on it with Gar. That is just the truth. So, I think that I'm proud of how little we had to actually change. Actually, if you ask that question, because if I'd really screwed up in 2008, or even if I just half-assed it, we'd have had to make a lot more structural changes than we turned out having to do. And so I'm proud that people will recognize a lot of 1E still in 2E, and I think that indicates that I earned my exalted position. I did not just stumble into it through dumb luck. I mean, I did stumble into it through dumb luck, but then I also completed on it, so that was nice.
Where do you stand on using AI in the creative process from 1 to 10, if 10 is embrace the singularity and 1 is Butlerian jihad now?
Well, I don't think we should have a jihad now, but by and large, the way that AI is mostly being used is to make people who are bad at things faster. I don't think that that's necessarily a gain. I'm not saying that there's never going to be an AI product that I don't think is cool. I specifically think that Robin had been practicing doing mid-journey art for like, I think, 3 years by the time Legions of Carcosa came out. So the illustrations to that are towards what good use of AI is. I don't reject that book at all,
I think
but
it's not
that's
mid-journey,
not how
but
people are using it.
sorry,
Yeah,
it's not mid-journey, but is on thickly trained stable diffusion version, I guess.
right. Yeah, and Robin, of course, only did it on public domain art.
Yes.
He didn't, and that if people just stopped stealing things, I might be more morally inclined to look at your garbage art. But the trouble is, people steal a bunch of stuff for it,
Yeah.
which I don't much like. But basically, I mean, I'm in the position of being JMW Turner when the photograph was invented. I feel like, yeah, that's going to be a bad problem for all the young artists, but I'm JMW Turner, so keep on keeping on, kids. But it's going to be part of the artistic ecosystem because it's not going to be uninvented. And so I think that just having not just the most ethical guardrails around it, but the most aesthetic guardrails around it. Don't accept slop. You shouldn't be accepting slop if it was made by a people either, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So don't accept slop. Just reject it and all its works.
Any advice on games where players just don't seem to latch on to any clues provided? I find myself suggesting a review of clues either outside the game or through an NPC. Do you have any better ideas?
Depending on the game, one way is to just do the clue board, like in the big board with the string on it from Wire. You can do that in game. You can do that out of game. You can do it however you want. Um, you can do a forced recap when you start the game the next session. You can say previously on Trail of Cthulhu, you discovered that the Baron actually wore lifts in his shoes and carries a gun that is not made in Earth, or whatever it is that you discovered that are the clues, and you just feed that back to them again. I think an NPC is not the ideal way of doing it because it sounds like the GM lecturing it. I think the better way is Robin's favorite, as a seasoned investigator, you realize type thing, and allowing the player to role play the we've had the clue all along moment, as opposed to having the police captain come and say you've had the clue all along, rookie, get back to it. I just think that's better for the Gumshoe idiom of you are competent, you are good at your job, you're not first level schmoes, you're investigators, for God's sake.
If you do reprint Eternal Lies, think about Lovecraft Historical Society props. I would definitely back it. We have some surprises that we are planning about it, but it's not concrete yet. We have a few months to prepare for it, so there will be some stuff that you will like in the crowdfunding campaign. Let's leave it at that about Eternal Lies. What are your best tips for someone planning to write a scenario campaign for Trail or NBA?
Most of my best tips for writing a campaign or a scenario in Trail or NBA are in those two books. With NBA, it's very much figure out what type of scenario you want and then add as much sort of cool spy stuff and horrible vampires as the story can withstand. With Trail, a lot of times I think a good thing is to figure out what sort of a horrible revelation you're building it toward, and then do the clues outward like the ripples in a pond from when you throw a rock in it. But those can both give. You can do it the other way, where you come with a really strong hook and then you just stay a scene ahead of the players. That's a great way to do something, as long as you trust your own improv skills. So I don't insist that everyone write their scenarios out in advance. And often, as you get good at running Gumshoe, you'll discover that doing that, A, wastes a lot of your effort because players are insane, and B, also means that you are subtly trying to nudge people toward a prescribed storyline, which is generally, as I've said upstairs, bad praxis.
Are there any cool new mechanics or ideas from another RPG that you want to borrow for a game but haven't yet?
I really like the plot stress mechanic that's in some of the Fate games. Chris Birch invented it for Star Blazer Adventures. I don't think I've ever done a game that has a plot stress mechanic, and I think that those are cool. And stress in general has been a really productive area for people designing games. The new Alien game, not that new anymore, but the Free League Alien game uses it super well and super evocatively. And, I think that if I were doing sort of a any kind of sort of long form a game that assumes long form scenarios, I might see about making that be a definitive part of scenario design and a definitive part of the rules. But right now, I'm not doing that, and we already have two kinds of stress in Trail, so it would have been pretty ridiculous to add a third kind, I think.
What history studies and Lovecraftian fiction cosmic horror have you read since 2007 that you used as a reference or inspiration for Trail of Cthulhu Second Edition?
Well, a lot, but the most specific history study that I used for Trail Second is a book called Al Capone's Beer Wars, which is a academic historian writing a history of the Capone uh, gang wars. Most books about that are not historical. Let's just say that. And so that was an incredibly good resource for that campaign frame. And then tons of cosmic horror. I hadn't read barely any Laird Barron in 2008. I hadn't read, obviously, Victor Laval hadn't even written. I hadn't read I don't think I'd read Silvia Moreno Garcia. But again, we don't own the rights to any of their stuff, so we can't just borrow things from them. It's just about approaches and how to do story and how to present horror that I'm trying to take on board. But a lot of it, Trail is at its base Lovecraft in the 1930s, and I haven't. There hasn't been any more Lovecraft, so I can't really add a lot to that.
Someone added to the question Fall of Delta Green.
Yeah, Fall of Delta Green. I've been running for 4 years, 5 years now. So the way I do a scenario now, I can just tell you how I do it. Is I think of something that one of my players will absolutely hate. I figure out a mythos version of that. Then I figure out a way to put that into the Vietnam War in 1969 because they're currently in Vietnam, and then I put a hook and I have them assigned to go investigate it. And the great thing about Fall is that you're still under military discipline. You can't say no. The government says you have to go to Cambodia and see why all these people are turning into birds. And you can't say, no, that sounds like several terrible ideas. You just have to go do it. And so, sure enough, the player I thought would hate it, hated it. I put in enough stuff that the other players also hated it. It was great. And I came up with a sort of a wild combination of sort of Hindu heresy or Buddhist heresy and Cthulhu mythos, because everything that I do now has to sort of lay the groundwork for Obsidian in the final adventure. So I'm always trying to think this thing. They hate it. It's in Vietnam. It's got a mythos thing. How does it point to Operation Obsidian? And once I've done that, the scenario space is pretty clear.
Lumphammer asks, what can Ken tell us about the amazing new pulp and purist symbols in Trail of Cthulhu Second Edition?
You can tell which one is which. That's what's amazing about them. You can actually, from a standing, I can't remember which one is the triangle and which one is the square myself. So I don't expect that anyone else found it very easy. And we have, I forget, was it, you probably know better than I do, Ibrahim. I forget, was it Dean or somebody else that designed the new ones? And we went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and now we have ones that are nice. And we're very excited by them.
We were talking about adding like different styles of play, like improvisational and whatnot. What happened to those?
Those are addressed in the GMing chapter where they belong because they don't affect rules the way that Pulp and Purist do. So it's two different lattices, basically.
Pulp and Purist and the other two?
Yeah, the improv, and I forget what the other one was.
Ken, I know you first had the day after Ragnarok in a suppressed transmission. Are there any other suppressed transmissions you'd like to build into something? Or any other whole worlds you'd like to build?
The short answer, yes. Probably about 20% of the suppressed transmissions are alternate or secret or magic histories, campaign worlds, broadly speaking. Maybe not quite that many, but I like all of them. I made them. Some of them depend way too heavily on other people's IP, so you couldn't build it, but it would be, great fun to get to go back and get a second bite at one or two of those apples. It's just that right now I don't really have the time to go pick a new fun one and build it out. But at any given time, there's always something going on in terms of you know ideas for worlds that I will or won't get to run. I mean, a lot of it is that I propose the given world to my players in my Monday game, and they say yes or no. And if they say no, then the world just has to go back. I finally got to run a game set in the Nidor superhero comic universe, which is public domain. So in theory, I could write it up. And it was the sort of 1950s covert supers game that I was hoping to run. Um, uh, I proposed that game first to my players, I think in 2004, maybe. And then after Winter Soldier came out, I was even more excited to run it. And then they they finally gave in. So never say never, I guess. But in terms of writing that up, that would be a big ask to take that world and present it in a way that people would want to play in it, over and above explaining who the Nidor superheroes are to people. So maybe, but it's really a matter of right now we've got a whole new edition of Trail to back up. So I've got a lot of, I have to either be fired or run out of ideas for that before we can do any more. I can do any more sort of Day After Ragnarok scope of book. Although Hal Mangold, my publisher for Ragnarok, does want me to add more to it so we can re-release it. So maybe we'll do that. The Serpent campaign for that is still nebulous. And then I do want to do the sequel to Day After Ragnarok, 500 Years After Ragnarok, where I do for Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers what I did to James Bond and Quatermass in the first one.
I've been dying to know, was there a Dreamlands or inner psychedelic space part of the Fall of Delta Green that didn't make the finished core book?
Yes, but sadly, I cut it so early that it doesn't exist as more than an outline. I realized going in that it would take 3 or 4 pages of that layout to do it well. And I did actually think of doing a campaign frame for it called Ex Oblivione, that would be the just capital X Oblivione, that would be the secret Delta Green project for going into inner space. And that would be Dreamlands, and it would be psychedelic drugs, and it would be all the other stuff that was going on in the 60s, the inner space campaign. But that's the sort of thing that I could write all day. And even keeping it down to the 3 pages it would have been in the core book would have been a struggle. And it was just, I mean, that book is already grotesquely overstuffed. And since it was an area that the pagan originals hadn't gone, it would have been more something that was part of the Delta Green universe would have had to get short shrift to put it in. So that wasn't the mission. So I took it out. But yeah, I'd love to do an inner space campaign sometime. And who knows? Maybe we'll do a 1960s acid heads of uh, Berkeley or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You pretty much made a career out off of being inspired by Lovecraftian mythology. What is it about his imagination and others inspired by him that causes you to keep going back to it?
Well, I mean, part of it is just that Lovecraft made one of the two myths in the 20th century that stuck. So it's not just me; everyone wants to go back to it. I think that the combination of cosmic scope and quotidian interrelationship with everything human is a amazing gift that Lovecraft gave us. The ability to take the Gothic and turn it into a world that we in the 20th, 21st century can believe in, or at least suspend our disbelief in, long enough to tell stories in, is an amazing superpower that he unleashed creatively. And the ability to take Gothic horror and turn it into the modern is it's a great project. And Lovecraft was far from done with it when he died in 37. And so just being able to, even without the monsters and everything else, who I love, all of the monsters and everything else, just that approach is such a great approach for creating horror and creating story and creating adventure, even in our day, that no one has gotten to the bottom of that well. Not even God bless him, Brian Lumley was able to. So I feel like anyone who's not inspired by that mythology is basically trying to either tell a different sort of story, which is great, some sort of comforting fiction, or they just haven't dug deep enough. They haven't, sort of found the place where it hits pay dirt for them. And that, you know, uh, I get that his prose is not for everyone, and I get his personality is not for everyone, but the structure that he birthed for the world in the reconstruction of horror, I think is for everyone.
I have a follow-up question. What do you think of the late invention of like Cthulhu mythos that is extremely cute? What do you think the rationale behind it would be?
We always domesticate stuff we're afraid of. We did it to fairies. We did it to vampires. We're doing it to Cthulhu. I think that part of it is that our culture is so rich, just in terms of money and time, that we're able to feed all manner of appetites and juvenile appetites among them. So our Kawaii Cthulhu is even more cloying than Shakespeare's fairies were, but you can see that same pattern happen throughout. You can see it happen in other things in Japanese culture where they took Godzilla and they said he symbolizes the American atom bombing of Nagasaki. And in not even 20 years, he's our buddy and here's his little kid. I mean,
Yeah.
you turning terrifying things into familiar, cute things is a thing that we do as part of a way to deal with terrifying things that we don't want to think about and we don't want to address face on. So it's much easier to say Cthulhu is a plush or he's a decal or he's a whatever than to say, oh, no, he's the fact that nothing we do matters and that we are all going to be doomed by something that we don't even know exists yet. And that if it did know about us, it wouldn't care. And that might be a gamma ray burster or that might be algae bloom or it might be whatever. But whatever it is, it's beyond our ability to change, and it is not happening as a punishment for our sins, real or imagined. And there's no way out if you're, quote, good. So if you don't want to look at that, of course you want to look at a little plush Cthulhu. He's much cuter than that.
I'd like to say I think the GM section in Trail First Edition is one of the best ever made. I recently got bitten by the proactive role-playing bug, encouraging players to come up with their own goals, like chasing their cultist brother or finding their missing sister. What's your take on co-creating settings with players as a group and running campaigns as player-directed stories based on their own ambitions? Any advice for folks like me?
I mean, I think that is the natural end point of role playing. It's a collaborative art. If they just wanted to hear you tell a story, you could be reading them a Lovecraft story. It's a collaborative art, and the degree of collaboration, of course, differs from table to table. But I think once you've let the players roll their own dice, you're down the step to the players co-writing their story, and I think it's great fun. I think ideas the players have or ambitions the players have are part of what make being a GM interesting to me. The reason I'm still doing it after insert insanely long period of years here is that if the players aren't part of the story and contributing and changing it, then I get bored, and so I really like that. In terms of advice, I would say that you sound like you got it great. Give build things out of the player hooks. Ask the players if there's something in their backstory that they think comes up. Encourage players to contribute. Even a thing like I don't know, you busted into the boathouse, you describe it, is super helpful because it gets players in the habit. And then just unless it absolutely nerfs your whole game, don't contradict the players. Just think of a different way to do it. Once they get the trust that comes from co-creation, they'll start feeding all manner of insane nonsense into your game, and you'll have all you can do to keep up with it. I have players like that in both of my campaign groups, where if I'm stuck for any great amount of time, it's very easy to sort of give them the reins in play, and then we're back doing something that I would never have thought of. So it's it for me, it's the point of doing this as opposed to a way to do this. But I get that, I mean, I certainly, when I was a kid, I wasn't running D&D that way. And
Yeah.
when I did let the players co-create D&D, they ruined it. So they had to be stopped forcibly.
What is your favorite game? NBA, Fall of Delta Green, Trail, Fear, and why?
My favorite game that I've made, which I assume is the point of that question, my favorite game is Sandy Peterson's Call of Cthulhu, first edition, 1981, except no substitutes. But, or maybe the fifth edition, actually, that's even nicer. But my favorite game that I've made is probably still Night's Black Agents, just because that is a game that I literally came up with out of whole cloth. Nobody else's IP is in it. It's all me. And it's one of the two games that I've done that came the closest on the final print to the version in my head. The other one being the Star Trek original series game I did for Last Unicorn, which was very, very much like the game that was in my head when I designed it. So I think for all those reasons, my favorite is NBA, but I love all of my children, of course. That would be wrong to say I don't.
What is the craziest thing you didn't expect you could add to published game that you got away with?
When we were designing Vampire, I suggested that we have the Second Inquisition blow up the prime chantry of the Tremere. I don't think that I thought I could get away with that. I proposed it mostly as okay, if you're serious about really changing the setting, here's a change. And they ran with it. That was pretty great. I don't know. Someone mentioned Day After Ragnarok. Day After Ragnarok is all crazy things that I added to a game because that was the point of it. So, Ronald Reagan starring as Conan the Barbarian, that was pretty great. I mean, I got away with it because it's my book and no one was able to tell me no. So that's the secret, by the way, to getting away with things is write your own book. I'm trying to think if I got away specifically with anything in Fall of Delta Green. There's a couple of places where I flew a little close to the sun in that, but nothing's coming immediately to mind. But there are, little things where, I'll get a bug in my ear and think that belongs in someone else's ear, and I'll sneak it in. But yeah, most of the things that I put in games are either little Easter eggs that only I will enjoy, or they're deliberate ways to break up the pavement to let story happen. And neither of those are, I mean, the Easter egg no one can catch, and the pavement breaking I usually have to get someone sign off on if it's a pre-existing setting.
We have Tour de Lovecraft, Tales, and Tour de Lovecraft Destinations. Any chance we'll get another book in the series? I need more Eldritch Luggage stickers.
The next book in the series, assuming I write it, is Tour de Lovecraft: The Hazards, which is about all the monsters and all the gods, and would look at those. The trouble with that book, first of all, is I have to have time to write it, and second of all, Graham Walmsley did a really good job of a book very like that with Stealing Cthulhu, so I'd have to figure out a way to do it that was not the way Graham did it. Graham did it for games, which is one of the big differences. But I think that Trail of Cthulhu: The Hazards is the next one in the series, and that might also be where I put things that are sort of tropey in Lovecraft that we don't, have treatments of, like Lovecraft's use of, the cult. What is that? Where did that come from? Is there stuff about it before? Does it all, just fall out of a merit, or is it something else? I think that would be a fun book to do, but again, it requires time to build one, and I don't have that right now. But it's on the list. Hal and I are talking about it, but Hal has to finish the deluxe leather-bound versions of Destinations before I get to do another book, I think.
I want 500 years after Ragnarok.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's a pretty great notion. At the very beginning, if you remember, in Day After Ragnarok, I say, because I was just riffing on Robert E. Howard, before the fall of, between the fall of the Serpent and the rise of the Sons of Space, and it was just, in Howard, it's Rise of the Sons of Arias. So I said the Sons of Space. And Hal then my publisher, said, "Who are the Sons of Space? I want to know what the Sons of Space. What are the Sons of Space?" And I said, "I don't know, Hal. I just wrote it to sound like Robert E. Howard." But then my notion was that the Sons of Space are the people who had settled on the moon and built a enormous, rich, powerful colony on the moon in the Day After Ragnarok universe. And of course, the trouble is that Ragnarok was just put on pause by the A-bombing of the Midgard serpent. And the other thing that happens at the beginning of Ragnarok is the great wolf Garm eats the moon. So the great wolf Garm had been stopped eating the moon, put to sleep for 500 years, and then he wakes back up and he's hungry and he starts eating the moon. And so the moon is falling in and being destroyed, and all the people who live on the moon have to go somewhere. And the where do they go? It becomes the sort of impetus for that 500 years after, and lets us go to, the Mars where they've been digging canals, and the Soviet communist apes have developed telepathy and turned green, and someone terraformed Venus with a serpent plasm, so it's a land of poisonous dinosaurs and all the other cool stuff. And the question is, how close can I take the real solar system and detourn it into the 30s pulp solar system? And then also, what's public domain? So Triplanetary, the first book in the Lensman series, the magazine version of that is public domain. So I can have the Thule Adepts orbiting Jupiter. And that seems like a great thing to do. So is Buck Rogers public domain yet? The novel is public domain, so I can do anything I want with that. The words Buck Rogers, maybe not, but who can say? And then how close can I get things? So do I have a Mongol ruler named Meng? Yes, of course I do. Why did he move from the 12th century to the 25th century? Well, that's in the book. So yeah, there's lots of stuff like that, and even more that I'll build out once I get around to writing it. But yeah, I want it as much as you do. Maybe only Hal wants it more than us two.
Thanks. I'd kill to run or play in an ex Oblivione campaign. Fall of Delta Green's Dreamlands material is tantalizing as it is.
I used Dreamlands in my Fall of Delta Green campaign, and players love the Dreamlands. If they can go, they will. And I did not mechanize it in quite the same way that I would have in Ex Oblivione, mostly because I didn't have the time. But there was elements of what would have gone into Ex Oblivione that showed up in play. And all I can tell you is it is pretty great to run and play in. Writing it up would take some thought as to how to do it license free, I think, because the license is not going to let us do that. And doing it as a 6-part series in Page XX, I think would be pushing it. So the notion would be, can I figure out how to do an inner space campaign without stepping on our friends at Pagan's toes, our friends at Arc Dream's toes? And I can, but again, it's the sort of thing that takes some effort.
I have a friend that says you cannot do a horror roleplay experience, but you can play with horror tropes and horror storytelling mechanics. I am not sure that I disagree. What is your opinion on that, on your experience as a mostly horror RPG creator?
I don't know what your friend means by horror roleplay experience. That's my answer. If the answer is no one gets scared playing horror games, then my answer is, as the kids say, skill issue. I have both been scared playing horror, and I have scared players running horror. And that's just empirical fact. I think that my general thought is, don't traumatize your players, for Christ's sake. This is a game. But there's absolutely ways to make a game scarier or not scary, depending on if that's what you consider to be your end state and your end goal. I find that if the players are good at immersing and they're good players and they like role playing, putting their characters in a situation where their characters are terrified does create bleed, and that's a good bleed. That's the good bleed that you like, not the bad bleed that you don't like. And everyone's game is different. Everyone's table is different. Everyone's player group is different. My Monday player group, one of my best players, just refuses to do horror because he hates being scared, which is fair. So I don't do that in the Monday game. But the Wednesday game, yeah, I've done it a ton of times. And
Yeah.
the Call of Cthulhu game that I ran as a kid in high school and college, yeah, I scared tons of people that way. Big, strong Oklahoma people, not little weedy neurasthenic people.
Yeah. Kermit asks, on cosmic horror authors, just want to throw out a recommendation for John Langan if Ken and others aren't familiar. The Fisherman was great, he says.
Yeah, John Langan is another really great one. I mean, there's a lot of great cosmic horror authors. You can't really list all the great ones. I mean, you can list the greatest because it's Thomas Ligotti, but after you've mentioned Ligotti, uh, you have to start a long list, and Langan is definitely on the list. Um, it's really really good. I think that Laird Barron is probably my number two guy, but John Langan is right in the mix any given Sunday, as they say.
There's been work recently in exploring surrealism through ttrpgs. What other artistic movements do you feel are ripe and underexplored for games to be made within?
I think that you have to sort of differentiate between the surrealists as a historical topic and surrealism as an artistic approach. I think that you can do both. I think Bookhounds mostly is surrealists as history and less surrealism as a game experience, although there's elements of that in what Robin did. The other games are more surreal. Troika, for example, is more surreal than Bookhounds. Um, or Dreamhounds. I think that in terms of other artistic movements, a lot of them are sort of operating at cross purposes. So there's, what would an abstract expressionist game even look like? I guess the answer is it wouldn't look like anything. But it's harder to do. I think that it's easier to look at things that are maybe closer cousins to role playing, like cinema, and say we haven't really had a new wave game. We need some new wave games. I think that'd actually be kind of cool. Or American new wave, even the sort of grotty, character-driven, character-focused stuff from the '70s. Some games approach that accidentally, but again, aesthetics of games is something that not everyone likes. The stronger an aesthetic, the more people bounce off it. So that's the trade-off. I think that exploring any sort of artistic expression through another art is, at the very least, it'll teach you about the art that you've decided to practice, and sometimes it turns into something really cool.
What do you think of the publication timing for Trail of Cthulhu's second edition as an RPG taking place during an economic crisis amid the international rise of far-right governments and a regional war in Europe? E.g., do you think it will appeal to our zeitgeist?
Well, I mean, I put the trail in the '30s instead of the '20s because, I don't know if you guys were around in 2007, but we had a global war and a lot of concerning developments for personal liberty then too. I think that this is getting to be like, the old joke, how do you know the end times are coming? Oh, there will be wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes and disasters. It's like, well, that doesn't narrow it down. I think that people are excited to draw parallels with the 1930s, both for good and bad reasons. And so I'm happy to do a game that lets you play in the 1930s as a way to work out whatever psychogenic tension you're feeling. Um, I think that uh, RPGs are pretty far down the run of things that appeal to the zeitgeist, um, because none of them break out of our tiny little hobby universe. I think the last one that did was Vampire, and even that was writing the zeitgeist of the '80s, the Anne Rice goth zeitgeist. It
Yeah.
wasn't building one or even extending it. So, it's nice if people find resonance in history in the present. That's always true. And again, Lovecraft is writing about the entirety of modernity. He's not just writing about the guy you're mad at on the TV.
I want a bibliography citation list from this AMA.
That sounds like a
Maybe,
project
yeah.
for someone who's listening to it later.
Sounds like a project for me. Any more adventures or campaigns in mind for MBA after threat profiles?
Yes. Gar and Robin says it was his idea. I think that Robin was an important catalyst to the process. Um, Gar and I have a really cool idea for a big NBA thing, which I don't even want to spoil with what kind of thing it is, but it's big, and it does involve vampires, and but not the vampires you're thinking of. And if Threat Profiles does well, and Gar and I are both not doing another thing that we think will sell better or the cat wants us to do, we will get to that and do it. But I don't want to tease it because then we'll be yelled at. When is the thing coming out? And we don't want to be yelled at. But
Yeah.
it's going to be amazing. You're going to blow your minds when it comes out. When we announce it, when you see the cover, you're going to say, "Oh, that's what Ken was talking about." That jerk. I'm so mad at him.
Don't even want to spoil an NBA thing. I want this, please. Mind already blown. As a follow-up on the horror roleplay, I do think that it requires both participation and investment from the players. Participation because playing a role is mostly power fantasy fulfillment, think, and investment so the damage in their characters cuts deep. Yes, I mostly blame me since I don't want to blame others.
Yeah, the zeroth rule of horror role playing is everyone has to want to play a horror game. Unlike adventure, unlike everything else that we play games for, horror requires buy-in, and it requires buy-in for everyone. One guy on their phone ruins it for everybody. Not to mention one person not taking it seriously. If you don't have that buy-in, you can't do it. But again, you're not trying to communicate with dolphins. You've got people. Say, does everyone want to run a horror game? Do you want to play horror? Do you want to get into horror? Do you want to get scared in the game? They say yes, then you're golden. Then you can start.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I say this in Nightmares of Mine, my first ever book on horror role playing. I said it in GURPS Horror. I say it in Trail. I say it in NBA. I've said it everywhere I can say it. Without all the players agreeing to play a horror game, there's no point in playing a horror game because it won't work. You're drilling into an emotional well. You're not drilling into just I'd like to stab an orc in the face. And emotion feeds on feedback, and fear is the easiest and best and deepest emotion that you can easily access in play. I hope. Don't play hate games, kids. Play fear games. And you can play love games, but hopefully not with 9 of your friends around a table.
I recently finished Masks of Nyarlathotep as a player running it now, and I really enjoyed the Peru prologue and the bonds connections created with Jackson Elias. Do you know of other gimmicks like that to bring players into scenarios on a deeper level?
I mean, that's the classic gimmick, right? It is give the players a reason to care about the character and give them a reason to care about the situation. A lot of times that's letting them co-create, letting them decide. Um, my brother was involved in that. My dad disappeared in that fire. Whatever. That's good old character hooks, goes all the way back. Um, Another part of it is just designing the thing so that they're hooked into whatever your story is about. This is a story about haunting in a house. Don't just have the players be guys who show up at the house. Have them be people who live in the house, people who are connected to the house. Have them create those connections. Another fun gimmick is to run the opening teaser where they're playing NPCs that are all munched by the monster, and maybe they survive and maybe they don't. Then when the player characters interview their old NPC, they will feel a connection. I think that what I call the supernatural hook or the X-Files hook is a really good way to do it. Thanks everyone for coming out. Sheila and I have to go see 28 Years Later, as I'm being told by Sheila. So if you guys have more questions or whatever, feel free to ping me on X or Blue Sky or Facebook or wherever you ping me, and pay attention. Ibrahim will make me do more Paychex X's, I'm sure.
Thank you very much.
So everyone get Trail second. See ya.